Alright, so today I want to compare the difference between the Woma ball python and the hidden gene Woma ball python. Both genes look extremely similar as standalone morphs. As a matter of fact, you can actually take a whole handful of Woma hatchlings, a handful of hidden gene Woma hatchlings, put them in a shoebox, mix them together, and you wouldn't be able to separate the Woma from the hidden gene Womas because they look pretty much identical just as a standalone gene. And the difference between the two is when you actually start working them into other combinations. With certain combinations, you get a completely different result from the Woma compared to the hidden gene Woma. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite snakes is the soul sucker, the combination of the hidden gene Woma and the lesser. And I actually have a couple big lesser females here in my collection. So you can actually go to a reptile show, you're looking for some snakes, and one of the situations you might run into is you might actually walk up to a table and see the Woma right next to the hidden gene Woma, thinking you want to make some soul suckers, and you're like, all right, can I substitute the Woma for the hidden gene Woma and make some soul suckers? And let me tell you, you get a completely different result choosing one over the other, working it into certain combinations. So today I want to jump over the internet and I want to show you the difference between the Woma and the hidden gene Woma ball pythons. Alright, so I want to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. This is the Woma ball python. And the Woma is a pretty interesting gene. You can make some pretty amazing combinations. And as far as the visual appearance of the snake, I'd say it looks kind of like a cross between a spider and an enchi. It almost looks like an enchi spider combination, but it's actually just one gene. It almost kind of has the spider web pattern that is really reduced, which is kind of an interesting appearance. And a lot of times you'll actually have a little bit of white coming up the sides, similar to what you'd see in a spider. And as a matter of fact, the Woma and the hidden gene Woma are both in what we call the spider complex. So one of the tricky things with both of these genes is the super form is a lethal combination. So if you have two snakes that contain Woma, you definitely don't want them to breed them together because 25% of the time you'll get a super Woma, which is a lethal combination. I actually went over on morphmarket.com and I was looking for the super Woma and the super hidden gene Woma, and no one has ever produced a super form and posted it over on Morph Market out of the 250,000 ball pythons over there, which tells me that it's probably a lethal combination. But kind of the interesting thing is even though both genes are in what we call the spider complex, you can actually make a Woma spider combination or a hidden gene Woma spider combination. I've actually seen the combination of those genes over on Morph Market. So when you're working with anything in the spider complex, it's a little bit tricky. You have to really be careful what you're crossing. And as a matter of fact, champagne is also in the spider complex. So if you're looking at the combination of the champagnes, the Womas, the hidden gene Womas, and the spiders, you might want to go over to morphmarket.com and see if anyone's ever produced that combination to see if it's a lethal combination. So this is the Woma, and take a look. If you actually compare this to the hidden gene Woma, take a look at this. It almost looks exactly the same as the hidden gene Woma as far as the visual appearance. It's pretty amazing how close they can be. And sometimes you can have some variations on a theme, but I was actually looking through all the hidden gene Womas and all the Womas, and you can actually find examples where they look almost identical, the hidden gene Woma versus the Woma. And if you actually come over here on morphmarket.com and just look at the sheer numbers of each gene, there's pretty much a little bit over twice as many hidden gene Womas over here on Morph Market. I think it was like 2,200 hidden gene Womas versus about 1,000 Womas. So this is definitely a more popular gene. So here is the lesser. The lesser is a pretty awesome gene. I actually have some really big lesser females here in my collection, and the lesser is in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And kind of the interesting thing, when you breed the lesser to either the Woma or the hidden gene Woma, you get completely different results based on the gene that you're breeding with the Woma. So here's what happens if you take the lesser and you breed it to a hidden gene Woma. 25% of the time you'll get what is known as a soul sucker. And take a look at this. This is a pretty surprising combination. It doesn't look like a lesser or a hidden gene Woma. It looks pretty wild, the combination of these two genes. And kind of the interesting thing about the soul sucker is a lot of people think that some people actually consider this to be an allelic combination, which it really depends on your definition of allelic. This is one of the gray lines in ball pythons where it kind of breaks the rules of what we consider to be allelic. So typically what we consider to be an allelic is two different genes that come together that act like a super. And in this case, you have two different genes that come together to complete they actually make a completely different visual appearance as far as the end result. This doesn't look like either of the genes, but it's not actually allelic. So if you bred it to something else, you don't get half lessers and half hidden gene Womas, which is kind of crazy. So take a look at this. This is kind of another example of the hidden gene Woma lesser. And when I first saw these soul suckers, it's the first thing that I thought of. This almost looks like a purple passion. It almost looks like it's in the blue-eyed leucistic as far as a blue-eyed leucistic combination. But it's kind of interesting because the hidden gene Woma technically is not in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, but the lesser is. So if you actually take the lesser and you breed it to any other gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, like the bamboo, the russo, the phantom, the Mojave, you'll actually get a blue-eyed leucistic. And it really depends on what you actually mix it with. So as a matter of fact, I actually pulled up another example of another combination that looks really close to this soul sucker. Take a look at this. I thought this was really interesting. Take a look at this. This is the purple passion, which looks really similar to soul suckers. I've actually seen soul suckers and purple passions that almost look identical, but the purple passion consists of the phantom and the Mojave. These are both in the blue-eyed leucistic complex, and sometimes if you actually work phantom into certain blue-eyed leucistic combinations, you'll actually get almost like a soul sucker type appearance between these two, which kind of is pretty wild that you have two completely different genes working together to form a similar looking snake. And the other thing about the soul sucker is it's really visually dominant, similar to what you'd see as some of the combinations in the blue-eyed leucistic that give you kind of the purplish colored snake. So I actually brought this one up over here. This one's pretty wild. This is actually a banana soul sucker yellow belly, and it almost acts as, it almost looks like the visual dominance of what you'd see in a purple passion. So if you actually took a purple passion and worked in banana, you'd get the banana looking color, but you get this really strong visual appearance of the background of the blue-eyed leucistic, and it almost acts the same as an allelic combination with the soul sucker, which is pretty interesting. As a matter of fact, I actually came over here to the Genetic Wizard and I plugged this in just for kicks. I kind of wanted to show you that if this was actually allelic or not. You can kind of test it over here on the World of Ball Pythons. So if you actually type in the hidden gene Woma lesser, which is your soul sucker, and you breed it to a female, just if you actually just leave this blank, it's actually breeding it to a normal, and then you hit calculate. If you actually look at the results down here, what you're actually getting is 25% normals, 25% lesser, 25% hidden gene Woma, and 25% you're reproducing the soul sucker, which is a pretty interesting result. So if it was actually allelic, what you would end up with is you'd get 50% lessers and 50% hidden gene Womas. You wouldn't get any normals and any hidden gene Woma lessers. So I actually brought it up over here just to double check over here in the Ball Python genetic calculator over here on Morph Market. I always want to double check my results in these calculators. Sometimes one of them may be incorrect. I've actually seen them kind of disagree with each other. And sure enough, you actually get 4 results breeding the soul sucker to a normal. And I remember back when I first started in ball pythons, I assumed this was an allelic combination because the two genes are coming together to form a completely different looking combination, which a lot of people actually consider to be allelic. I've actually seen some old time breeders say, yeah, the soul sucker is an allelic combination, but it kind of breaks the rules where if you breed it to something else, it doesn't act like a super, and you can reproduce the hidden gene Woma and the lesser, which is a pretty amazing result. So take a look at this. If you actually compare the soul sucker, which we really have a handle on, compare it to the same combination using the Woma instead of the hidden gene Woma in the lesser, take a look at what the Woma does to the lesser. It's pretty amazing. It's a completely different visual appearance, even though the Woma and the hidden gene Woma look pretty much exactly the same as a standalone gene. When you work it into lesser, you get a completely different appearance. As a matter of fact, it almost seems like the lesser completely wipes out the spider web pattern of the Woma, which is pretty wild. You're left with almost like it's like a different version of, it doesn't even look much like a lesser either. It almost looks like almost the combination between a lesser and a normal kind of really wipes out the combination of the lesser Woma combination. It's definitely not a soul sucker using Woma instead of the hidden gene Woma. So I actually wanted to show you one more example over here of kind of what the difference is working Woma and hidden gene Woma into other combinations other than the soul sucker. And one of my favorite bamboo combinations is working Woma into the bamboo. And look what the Woma does to the bamboo. It brings all the color up to the top of the snake. And I found that a lot of times with the Woma bamboos, a lot of times you get this almost like a metallic gold color, really beautiful combination between the Woma and the bamboo. And kind of the interesting thing on this is if you actually look at the side of the snake, it wipes out all the patterns that you'd normally see on the side of the ball python. And then the pattern, if you look at the pattern right on the top, it's this like a squiggly line right on the top of the snake all the way down from pretty much from head to tail down the whole snake. And if you actually compare the Woma bamboo to the hidden gene Woma bamboo, take a look at this. You get a completely different result working in the hidden gene Woma. As a matter of fact, this is actually called the plutonium, which is the hidden gene Woma bamboo combination. And it's pretty interesting. It seems like a lot of your hidden gene Woma combinations leaves a lot more pattern in the snake, and you can actually see more of a broken up pattern, where a lot of times in the Woma, it'll bring more pattern to the top and kind of string it together in kind of a long, kind of a squiggly pattern all up and down the top of the snake. So when you're working genes, the hidden gene Woma or the Woma into combinations, you definitely get a completely different visual appearance. You can definitely tell the difference between the Woma and the hidden gene Woma in most of your combinations, but I'd say they kind of both work together where they really reduce the pattern and bring a lot of the pattern to the top of the snake. Pretty awesome. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Buddy Murray asks, is it safe to inbreed ball pythons, such as breeding the mother to the son? And that is a very good question. I say it really depends on who you're asking if it's okay or not. So if you actually ask some veterinarians, I'd say most veterinarians will probably frown on breeding siblings together or breeding the mother to the son and line breeding that way. But if you actually ask some of these old-time reptile breeders that have been breeding ball pythons for like 20 or 30 years, I'd say most people pretty much across the board will agree that you don't really have a problem inbreeding with genetic defects like you would actually see breeding other animals like dogs or horses or something like that. And sometimes you're actually forced into breeding depending on what project you're going with. So for example, I actually took an albino pied and I bred it to a clown female to produce some triple heads. Het albino, het pied, and het clown. And if I had my option, I would actually find another triple head from another breeder with a completely different line and buy that one and breed it to my triple head. But sometimes you produce something like that. It can be a world's first. As a matter of fact, over on Morph Market, I've yet to see a similar triple head that I could work into my project. So I'm pretty much forced to breed siblings together to advance the project. And if you actually think about some of the genes in ball pythons, so for example, the scaleless head ball python actually came, it was one of the recent ones that came out when I started in ball pythons about 5 years ago. And keep in mind, the first scaleless head came from the wild, and I'm pretty sure every single scaleless head that is in all of ball pythons came from that original scaleless head ball python. So every time you're breeding two scaleless heads together to produce a scaleless ball python, every single one of them technically is related in a way. So essentially you're line breeding that way. But I've actually seen some people, what they'll actually do is they'll take like a scaleless head and they'll breed it to a normal or a wild caught animal to introduce some new genetics to kind of refresh the line and do it that way. So sometimes it really depends on who you're asking. I'd say most people, especially in the reptile industry, that would say it's perfectly fine line breeding or inbreeding ball pythons. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.